What's up, world? I am Thunder Thief, and today we are talking about the 7th track on my album. It's starting to take a turn for a little brighter, a little more vocal and high energy, and this song is called Daylight. This track is one of my favorites on the album because in my heart of hearts, like the first genre that really made me fall in love with music and wanting to really fold it into my life as like a guiding pillar of it is pop punk music. And the difference between like pop punk music and drum and bass and just punk music in general is just like the sound design. And I tend to noodle around on my guitar like I'm the lead guitarist of Rufio or Taking Back Sunday or something like that. I really like the chord voicings and melodic instincts of a lot of that music, and the first thing I wrote is the first thing you hear, which is that guitar part. I didn't have the click on. I didn't have any sort of tempo expectations or key expectations. I was just playing on my guitar and seeing what came. And when I figured out the tempo for this riff and like put it out, it was 85 BPM or 170, just depending on how you want to count it. And that is full-blown drum and bass tempo world right there. So I was really excited to get started on writing a drum beat to that because that guitar part I think is so beautiful and melodic. And I wanted a drum and bass style drum, but played kind of subdued. Like you don't actually really hit the snare at all except for in some fills of this song. It mostly stays on the rim, and I kept thinking about how a drummer would play this song like in a jazz club or something like that, where it's a lot more nuanced and soft. And as I was programming the beat, I just laid down that typical like kick snare relationship and then got started finding what I wanted the drums to actually sound like. And here's what I landed on. And there's basically a version of that beat throughout the whole song that grows, and like the drummer changes from the hi-hat to the ride, and this loop kind of creeps up and does a little bit more and can be heard more and then comes down. And then there's several sampled drum fills that I cut up and put at the ends of phrases to make it feel like it was a drummer playing this song. I immediately knew that I wanted a second guitar to just play along with the main guitar part, but not necessarily be something that is independent, but more like harmonic and subservient to the main part. And so I wrote some high chords basically to run along with that main guitar part that sound like this. And I just had those two guitar parts and that drum beat just running through on a loop for ever and really loving the groove of that. And the next thing was to find a bass that served the song well and filled it with like warm energy. Like this song has this hopeful intention that I remember looking out my studio window, and this was in like the springtime of 2021, and still like I'm still getting over like these introverted tendencies that in 2020 was just like, that's all we needed to do was stay inside and find ways to not go crazy being inside. And it feels like now it's a lot harder to get motivated to go outside a lot. And it's easy to forget sometimes like how beautiful and wonderful the outside world can be. over the summertime, it's very easy to stay happy because the sun's out a lot and the temperatures, like, you want to be outside and are more comfortable. But then in the wintertime, it takes a little more to exist out there. And then especially that transitionary period of the springtime, which I was born in, is always, in Colorado especially, is like such a surprise. We can get blizzards and the craziest snow like all the way through April, and that's supposed to be the time we're starting to turn on and warm up. I remember looking out, wanting to feel the sun and to do some typical fun stuff in the sun with my friends, wanting to just keep making experiences. And so I was excited because that feeling of just wanting to go outside and be outside is something that I fight on occasion, because now I've spent so much time and energy like nesting and creating a space that I feel immensely comfortable and myself, and you forget that you can do that exact same thing out there. And I sketched out this bass line first. I thought, hey, let's see what playing it with a bass guitar sounds like. And it came a little too like punk rock. The way I love my bass guitar tone usually is like, has a lot of high end. And when you strike it with a pick, it just has this like crunchy kind of punk tone. And I wanted something warm and inviting to reflect the feelings that I had inside. So I popped open Diva and was looking through some of the presets, and I found one and I was tweaking a little bit. Drum and bass is so revered for its movement and its like craziness. And I wanted something that rode that edge of, here's something familiar in a way that was played by a bass guitar. And I love the interplay that bass has with the drums. Like, there's some weird stops, very punk rock style stuff, I think, and rock and roll type stuff where you're like, you stop on the 1 and hit on the 2 when the snare comes in, and like that's the first impact. It's not a kick, it's a snare. I do those stops and have different sort of interplays of fills and spatial stuff to change between, on the drums, the hi-hat and the ride. And so when you have the ride playing, it sounds like this. And that loop, you can hear like the top loop that sort of is like a, I don't know, like a mouth noise, like type of sound. And the drums are on the ride, and then at the end, there's one of those drum and bass fills. It's just like that. And it's so much fun to play punk drums. And at the time, I didn't have my electric drum kit, so I was like just finger drumming all of these different parts. And now that I've gotten some time to like play everything on drums again for real, like this is one of my favorite songs by far, just by how it feels to be behind a drum kit and playing those beats. This is the 7th song on the album, and it's the first time that I actually sing on it and have my vocals be a part of the song in a way that's forward and a lead. And I was listening to this beat and looking outside and just thinking about that sentiment, and it's like a motivation. Like the lyric, feel the sun and go outside, is something I have to convince myself of on occasion. Like, it's just been a sad handful of years, and the sun can just do so much, and just feeling the warmth of it can do so much. And that's just one of those calls to action that I need to hear on occasion. Feel the sun and go outside. And I have it affected and all that stuff because I honestly don't really like the sound of my own voice. I spent a lot of time like editing this podcast and how I talk, and spent a lot of time in music, like singing along with real amazing singers, and just the tone that I have has a place in my music, but the way that it's portrayed, I'm constantly trying to wrestle with and improve. And this is one of those times where I'm kind of low and whispery and low energy, so it's more of like a gentle whisper rather than like a yelling, like feel the sun and go outside. Like that seems too harsh. I am grateful to be able to record my own voice and then manipulate it on a sample pad, because I love glitched out vocal stuff, but I love it even more when it doesn't really sound like it's a vocal. It just is this sound, but inherently, because it was recorded and made by me and turned into this, like it's a completely original sound that not even a machine can do. And I just cut up a little of that hook and created this. And that's just a pretty simple glitch thing, but the texture amongst everything else in the song, I think it just adds this little electronic nod that in a bunch of combinations of guitars and synth stuff and like real sounding drums, I think it just has its own place, getting to be this like glitched out inhuman sounding vocal. But I didn't want that pulsing throughout the song all the time. I wanted it to be sort of like a interesting part every now and again. And I went back and started looking for a synth like counter melody that could play like lightly, like almost like a Tinkerbell sort of thing on top of the song. And I opened up Diva again and threw an arpeggiator on there and just started playing just some random notes to move alongside the chord progression. And I eventually ended up settling on this. And that synth part just has this very ethereal, light brightness to it that changes with the melody enough where it elongates that chord progression to twice as long because of the way that melody sits on top of stuff. And that's just one of those parts that I think is felt more than heard. But hearing it solo, like I really like all the nuances of it. One of the last things that I wanted to have was this like guitar solo, like break. I was thinking of this song like in context of like a trio and a bass player, a drummer, and a guitar player, and how they would play this song and the kind of things like you naturally want to do in a situation like that as a guitarist. And a solo of some kind, I think, is a natural evolution. But I didn't want it to be this like fast, like sweeping guitar style sort of thing or a typical like pop punk style solo. I wanted to do a similar thing that I did with the vocals and take that main guitar line and lay it out across a sample pad and just start playing along with the song and see what surprising stuff I could come up with. And I ended up stumbling on this awesome cut and recorded it and just fell in love with it every time I hear it. That riff just has the same sort of soft spirit, I think, that the drums do. And I've tried figuring out how to play it just on the guitar, and it's really hard. So I like that it's one of those like simple but impossible things. And simple and wonderful, I think, is a pretty awesome takeaway from this song. It is intentioned to be uplifting, but not in a way that's like pulling you, more like in a way that's like a gentle hand on your back, like supporting you. And the guitar interplaying with the drums, they just work together in similar ways and totally different ways. And as the song ends, it just becomes the drums playing less and less of the kit and eventually leading out. And I always just think of playing all these instruments as a band, and this is the last run through of the night. And I think it's a nice way to end this song, and like this energy is just to have some drums take you out, and you can hear it like this. And I think that's such a wonderful punctuation to finish that song. So I hope you enjoy Daylight.